Welcome to the debate. When structural engineers design a skyscraper to withstand a massive earthquake, they don't just optimize for flexibility.
Right.
They rely on sheer, unyielding rigidity deep in the core foundation, because that core has to bear immense crushing pressure so that the beautiful glass architecture above it doesn't it doesn't collapse into dust when the ground starts shaking.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense from an engineering standpoint. But if you are the actual human being living inside that structure and you feel the walls constantly closing in on you because of that exact same rigidity.
It feels claustrophobic.
Exactly. The fact that the building is theoretically stable doesn't make the psychological claustrophobia any less suffocating.
And that tension, that exact tension between stability and suffocation, is the landscape we are exploring today. We're looking at a striking text called 7 Battles for Uncommon Success.
Yes.
Which is a book that explicitly frames human life as an adversarial environment. It argues that to achieve what it calls uncommon success, an individual has to conquer a series of defined battles. So emotional, mental, financial, and family battles.
Right. It basically says life is a war, and traditional duty is your armor.
Yes. And it sets up a very binary, zero-sum reality. The core question we have to ask today is, do these rigid traditional family roles and duties provide a necessary foundation for a meaningful life, or do they inflict a severe psychological toll that suffocates individual freedom and modern personal growth?
So for today's discussion, I will defend the psychological utility and stability of the text's traditional framework, and I will adopt the viewpoint of a modern skeptic, arguing that these expectations critically undermine personal autonomy.
Let's get right into it then. When I read this text, I see a profoundly stabilizing blueprint for navigating what is, honestly, an inherently difficult world. By defining life's challenges as structured battles.
Like the battle for integrity.
Exactly. The battle for integrity or the battle for your family. It provides objective metrics for success. It quotes Proverbs 24:3, noting, through wisdom is a house builded, and by understanding it is established.
But wisdom here implies strict adherence to duty.
Actually creates intergenerational stability. The text cites Proverbs 20.7, saying that a just man's children are blessed after him. This structure anchors the individual. It offers a deeper sense of purpose than our modern, somewhat chaotic pursuit of unbounded autonomy.
See, I don't disagree that modern life has its anxieties, but when I look at this text, I see an architecture of immense psychological distress. The central thesis is literally, you must conquer or be conquered.
Which is a realistic view of adversity.
Is it? When you tell a human being that life is a constant battle, you are fundamentally altering how their brain experiences reality. You are forcing them into a constant state of hypervigilance. The brain is perpetually scanning for threats.
But there are threats. Life is difficult.
It's on the individual to provide isn't just a strong suggestion, it is absolute.
Well, it treats provision as a moral imperative.
A terrifying one. The text reminds us that if a person doesn't provide, they have denied the faith and are worse than an infidel, referencing 1 Timothy 5:8. Think about the psychological weight of that.
Providing for your family is a heavy responsibility.
But imagine a modern parent who is totally burned out in a corporate job. They want to pursue a passion that's less profitable, but would make them a much healthier human being. Under modern concepts of personal growth, that's a brave pivot.
Right.
Under this text's mandate, it's a profound moral failure. Your life choices are entirely dictated by the mandate to ensure your barns shall be filled with plenty, as it quotes Proverbs 3.
Because the text argues your life isn't just about your personal self-actualization.
But look at the trap it creates. It strips away individual freedom, essentially reducing a person's worth to their financial utility and rigid compliance.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. You were looking at the traditional provider role as if it were a prison cell.
Because it functions like one?
No, go back to my analogy. It's the load-bearing foundation of a house. A foundation doesn't exist just to be a heavy rock in the dirt. It has to bear immense, crushing weight so that the architecture above it, the family unit, can actually exist and thrive.
So being crushed is the goal?
Sacrifice is the goal. Yes, the text is incredibly demanding.
It commands individuals to bring their tithes to the storehouse, referencing Malachi 3:10, and to maintain extreme discipline. The modern skeptic views this as a loss of autonomy.
Because it is.
But it's a voluntary sacrifice. And voluntary sacrifice is not a constraint on your freedom. It's the highest possible exercise of it. You build something enduring. You get traction in life. The modern pursuit of unbounded autonomy often feels like, well, spinning your tires in the mud, because there's no weight over the axles. Duty gives you that weight.
I love the analogy of traction, but we really have to look at what happens when the engine overheats. A foundation made of concrete doesn't feel anxiety. It doesn't suffer from clinical burnout. Human beings do.
Of course.
When you frame a person's existence entirely around carrying that weight, and you attach absolute spiritual ultimatums to dropping it even for a second, you aren't fostering resilience. You are fostering terror.
Well, let's talk about the internal processing of that weight, because that leads naturally from the financial battle to the battle of the mind. The text doesn't ignore internal struggles.
No, it doesn't. And I come at it from a different way. I don't see the battle of the mind as offering any relief. I see it as the point where the psychological toll becomes completely overwhelming.
Overwhelming? How? It's about establishing order.
Because the external demands are crushing, and the internal demands are frankly Orwellian. The text asserts that you have to constantly view your own internal landscape, your thoughts, your doubts, as a battlefield.
It requires regulation, yes. Taking heed according to thy word, as Psalm 119.9 says.
Right. Total regulation of your internal monologue. To a modern skeptic, treating your own natural doubts as enemy combatants doesn't create a healthy mind. It's an anxiety-inducing suppression of self-discovery. You aren't allowed to organically explore who you are or entertain contradictory ideas. Even a passing thought of doubt is an active threat to your survival.
Okay, wait. I have to actively push back on this premise. You're equating the modern concept of unstructured internal freedom with psychological peace.
I'm equating it with a lack of terror, yes.
But look at the modern psychological landscape. Is it peaceful? No. People are paralyzed by anxiety, and I'd argue it's precisely because they have no external anchor to tether their thoughts to. James 1:6 warns against this exactly, saying, "A person without faith is like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed."
But there is a massive difference between having a helpful anchor and being chained to the ocean floor.
The text doesn't offer chains. It offers an antidote to chaos. It points to 2 Timothy 1:7, the spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. That sound mind is achieved through discipline, not through letting every fleeting emotion dictate your reality.
I understand the appeal of certainty, but the text demands conformity under threat. It's a hostile way to live inside your own head.
Let's follow that logic then. If this highly structured, disciplined mentality is required to survive an adversarial world, how does it affect the most intimate parts of life? Let's move to the battle for your family.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that this rigid mentality is anything but damaging here. Let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
When you take this adversarial mindset into the home, the text ends up instrumentalizing human beings. It explicitly views children as a reward and arrows to speak with the enemies in the gate. That's Psalm 127.
It's poetic language for legacy.
But the psychology behind it forces the family into a military hierarchy. It warns of a house divided against itself from Mark 3:25, and demands fathers bring up children in strict admonition per Ephesians 6:4. This entirely subsumes the personal autonomy of both the parent and the child into the collective battle strategy, a barracks rather than a home.
That fundamentally misreads the emotional core of the text. You're looking at the family battle in total isolation from the very next section, the battle to stay in love.
How does staying in love fix a military hierarchy?
Because the text perfectly balances that structural authority with profound, radical self-sacrifice. Ephesians 5:25 demands that husbands love their wives even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it.
But even that love is framed as a battle.
Yes, because genuine love requires fighting against our inherent selfishness. Traditional duty, according to this text, requires the ultimate surrender of the ego from the person at the top of the hierarchy. And what does that yield? The fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, long-suffering, from Galatians 5:22. That is profound personal growth. It is far deeper and more enduring than the modern skeptic's superficial concept of individual freedom.
The promise of love and peace is beautiful. No one is arguing against those outcomes, but you can't ignore the mechanics. The requirement to love unconditionally is heavily shadowed by the threat of failing the mission. You must conquer or be conquered. That extracts an incredibly high psychological price.
It instills profound responsibility.
Or profound dread. When sacrifice is mandated under the threat of spiritual failure, it ceases to be a free gift of love. It becomes a survival mechanism.
Well, we are coming up on time, so let's synthesize where we stand. To summarize my perspective, the wisdom keys and structured duties outlined in this text, though demanding, provide an essential framework. By embracing the sacrifice required to build a house and maintain integrity, individuals achieve a truly sound mind and an enduring legacy.
And maintaining the viewpoint of the modern skeptic, I have to conclude that the text's conquer or be conquered framing extracts too high a price. The severe ultimatums for traditional compliance create a state of perpetual hypervigilance. It fundamentally compromises personal autonomy and individual freedom.
It's a deep, ongoing tension, isn't it? The absolute necessity of traditional duty versus the human desire for personal autonomy.
Yeah. Does the armor we put on protect us, or does it crush us under its weight?
Exactly. There's so much more complexity to explore within this text regarding how humans navigate these emotional, social, and spiritual battles. We'll leave it to you, the listener, to weigh the merits of these arguments for yourselves. Thank you for joining us on the debate.